The name of this next event is Success Factors for Drug Treatment Courts, a drug treatment court judge and a drug treatment court alumni perspective. A drug treatment court graduate and the judge who presided in the drug treatment court in Toronto during her tenure share insights on some success factors. Justice Stephen Clark, His Honor from the Ontario Court of Justice, former presiding judge, drug treatment court, and sharing in the presentation, Nikoleta Curcin, a research consultant and from the Toronto Drug Treatment Court graduate. The bio for Nikoleta Curcin: she graduated from the University of Toronto in 2012 with an honors Bachelor of Arts degree in English Lit. She is also a graduate of Toronto's Drug Treatment Court program. Upon becoming an alumni of the program in December 2020, she started volunteering with Right On, a prisoner rights organization that seeks to empower incarcerated individuals through information and knowledge sharing. Nikoleta is a peer consultant on the cannabis and drug treatment courts in Ontario research project with CMHA Ontario and JHSO, and a peer researcher with the MAP Justice and Equity Lab at St. Michael's Hospital. As a speaker and person with lived experience, she brings a unique perspective on the sources of trauma inherent in the criminal justice system, as experienced by the criminalized population and advocates for therapeutic alternatives to incarceration. Yes. Sorry, Nikoleta, that's all wonderful. Thank you, everybody, and welcome.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me? It's Justice Clark.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for having me or having us. Just allow me to introduce, as you just have, Mr. Bolton, Nikoleta. I want her to be the star of the show because she is. I'm merely the wind blowing quite forcefully from time to time beneath her wings. I am retired as a full-time justice now. I do sit on a per diem basis. I was in the drug treatment court in Toronto for the last 5 years of my tenure after almost a 20-year degree on the bench, and the last 3 as team lead. So I have the same lived experience with Nikoleta as she has had herself going through our journey together. She is the person you really need to hear from today in our brief 20 minutes. As you'll soon discover and as introduced, she is extremely articulate, insightful, knowledgeable, given those lived experiences, and is happy, I think, Nikoleta, to share some of those experiences today. Let me just very briefly set the context and the background in these next few minutes, and then I'm going to turn to Nikoleta, who can hopefully impart some information, if not knowledge and wisdom, about how she became addicted, how did she get out of it, so to speak, and what was a significant, almost singular negative and indeed a positive aspect of her drug treatment experience in Toronto. Time permitting, in the last 5 minutes, I'll try to summarize with some takeaways as to how we measure or gauge success, and that is in quotes, in the drug treatment court. Let me set the tone and the stage by saying that Nikoleta and I first crossed paths, in fact, locked horns, one might say, with one another in 2018. It is almost an understatement to say that there were peaks and valleys in our relationship. In the first year, 2018, even Nikoleta would have to agree with me, I'm sure, that she was the artful dodger. We played cat and mouse with one another, and we often went in circles as we, the treatment team and the court team, tried to find an engagement entry point with her. Initially, Nikoleta, like many others, had or took the attitude that she would play the game with us and then quite frankly, fake it until she made it by going through the motions with the almost singular view of avoiding the threat of jail or incarceration. Without losing my neutrality, I thought and hoped, empathy, understanding, with a lot of what I will call deep listening to her and the other treatment and court team members, I convened a conference, which was in fact the first and only time that I did so with any of our participants, where I actually got off the bench, off the perch, so to speak, to ameliorate the perceived or real power imbalance that I could sense Nikoleta had with us, and proposed with the input of others that she prepare a written assignment as a sanction for one of her many shortcomings in not coming to court, not complying with terms of her treatment modality. And we knew that she was prepared to do this given the benefit of her higher education, but to help us to help her by better understanding her needs, wants, changes that she'd like to make, what steps she planned to take, what were her next steps, and what things might get in the way or interfere with her plan. In March of 2019, after weeks, if not months, of pulling teeth, after hearing just about every sophomoric, although creative trick in the book, from the dog ate my draft to the laser printer ran out of ink to a myriad of other adolescent excuses, we received a very powerful composition describing and plumbing the depths of her despair, as only a university English major as she was could create. I won't go on about its contents, except to say that the main theme had to do with her always believing that she would be a princess living in a castle with a moat around it for protection and security, only to find, rather ironically, that with the onset of addiction, the castle had no gate or door to get out, and that the moat was filled with demons. We, the team, were able to use this assignment to assist in formulating and employing various treatment modalities and techniques. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I now give you that princess, Nikoleta Curcin, to tell you something about her journey and her road to success. May I also underscore that Nikoleta has not been selected as a cherry picking to demonstrate the success and the gold standard of the program. Just so happens that Nikoleta was a successful participant, graduate, and has the ability, with her permission and her agency, to impart some of this information to those in need. So with all of that, I turn to Nikoleta. If you have any introductory comments, Nikoleta, we're happy to hear from you. Otherwise, I really go to question one, which is how and why did you become addicted?
Yeah, I just wanted to start by saying that that was a very good description of our initial relationship there with the court team and the treatment team as well. And it took some time to change, but that writing assignment really did not only provide the team with insight, but it provided me with insight about myself, even though it, took me weeks or months to actually get it in. But once I did, it gave, also I shared it with my father, and it gave him an idea of my internal experience. So I'll quickly move on to the questions. So the first one, why? Why did I become addicted? This is never easy. It's everything in life, I think, is simple and complex at the same time. So I could very simply just say, generally, the root cause of addiction is trauma. So I think that's true for the most, if not all, people dealing with addiction. But it is always more individual and more complicated than just that. So I had a magnificent childhood. And then when I was a teenager, I started feeling differently. My emotions were overwhelming. I didn't know why I felt this way. I did go see mental health professionals, and I was either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, and the diagnoses never fit. The medications I were given were, they weren't beneficial, to say the least. And then I think due to this, what I later found out was borderline personality disorder, 20 years later. I ended up in a lot of scenarios that were tumultuous, including when I was a teenager, an abusive relationship. So I was in this relationship for 4 years, and the first few months seemed normal, and then very, very quickly escalated to physical abuse and sexual abuse and emotional abuse and controlling behaviors and all the standard things of intimate partner violence. And I did not have a support network because I hid it from everyone. I assume, I was hiding it from my family to protect my family. I was hiding it from my friends to protect my friends from him. Or at least this is what I believed. And I was at no point during this relationship, there was a lot of police contact. I was never provided with any resources other than, do I want to report this person, which I did not due to fear of retribution. And so this was 4 years long. It ended, he ended up, he died. And so I thought, okay, now I can, be normal, do all the things that normal people do. So I went to university and I really tried just to do what other people do, or like at least seem like I am living life in whatever normal meant to me at the time. And I realized, only much later did I realize that this actually was a traumatic experience. I know that seems obvious, but I didn't see it as such at the time. I thought, okay, this is no big deal. These things happen. Get over it, move on with my life. And sometime during my BA, I discovered heroin. And heroin made me feel like I can finally be normal. I can deal with my overwhelming emotions because now they've been brought down a notch. And I assumed that this is how other people feel. And this is why, but maybe without that. And this is why they can make it through life, because they're somewhat detached. They're not so sensitive, so invested in not only what happens to them, but to the people around them and in the world. And, the despair didn't seem so overwhelming for everybody else. And I thought, okay, so this is how normal people feel. I just have to take this every day and I'll be like everyone else. And so I guess that is how and why I became addicted.
And I certainly appreciate this is a very simplified version of the various layers of the onion, so to speak. But given our time constraints, we're more whetting the appetites of our listeners. Could I just ask you then to address the second question? How did you address it and get out of the spin cycle, so to speak, through drug treatment court, and how did they assist?
Yeah, so it was really all thanks to drug treatment court, because ever since, I was 16 when all the, I guess, like mental health issues, if you will, began, and then the toxic relationship, and then all the other things. It was a 20-year journey. And if it hadn't been for drug treatment court, I don't know where I would be. I mean, I have a good idea. I'd be dead, because there were many times that I contemplated and attempted to do that. So basically, like, I had been and had contact with the court system before, and it was just incredibly dehumanizing. And I know the word Kafkaesque gets thrown around a lot, but what I mean by that, and I think what is meant when people say Kafkaesque is that it's threatening, confusing, that you feel lost in this process of bureaucracy that you just can't understand and that you have no support with. So that was really my experience with the system. Like, you're just this non-human person who is brought out, paraded out into this box after you've been there, either all night or however long, and you're gross and dirty and maybe sick if you're using, and nobody's actually looking at you except the audience in the court, but the judge and the crown and even, the lawyer, they don't really look at you. They don't want to know you. So it's all very cold and detached and impersonal. And yeah, it was extremely unsupportive, and re-traumatizing, because it was the same sort of control that I felt in the relationship, in the abusive relationship. So DTC was so different. Not only, of course, specialized courts talk a lot about trauma-informed approaches, and I think that's extremely vital. I do still think that we need to take a deeper look of how to go about that, how to go further with that, what that actually means, like both in our specific courts, but systemically and structurally. But
And I'm sorry to interrupt because time is now our
Oh,
enemy. But
yes, okay.
would you mind just touching briefly? I appreciate that
Yes.
DTC took a trauma-informed approach. I think your circle of trust developed with the treatment team. I know
Exactly.
that when you and I were discussing how to put this together, that the primary therapist or therapists that you had
Yes.
were absolutely vital and key to this. Could you just touch, just so our listeners are aware of that situation where you had those feelings of your life being over, having no hope,
Right.
and the random way in which you were rescued?
Yes. So basically, I did during my addiction, especially there towards the end, I felt completely hopeless, like my life was over. And I did want to end it. And I tried a couple of times. And there was one instance where I actually overdosed, and the overdose was an accident. I ended up in the hospital unconscious for like a day and a half, but there was another user there, I guess, and he gave me 2 injections of naloxone and called the ambulance, which is why I ended up in the hospital. And I was so angry with him. I was furious. I told the guy, "Oh, I hate you for doing this to me. You know, how could you? This was my opportunity to get out." And you know, after my experience with DTC, I am honestly so grateful to him, because that would have been the end. And I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I hope I do, but I'm so thankful to him and to the team, the court team, the treatment team were so vital in believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. And that really made a difference.
Thank you. There may be a Netflix documentary in the making here, Nikoleta. Just finally and very briefly, before our screen goes dark, perhaps, just turning to the last question, which is, what about the DTC experience? There were some negatives. The positive, I think we can all appreciate from what you've just said. So maybe I'll just speak for you and you can say yay or nay. The positive that we had discussed is really that it humanized you, I think is what you're saying, and that it's allowed you now to not only give back in all the ways that you're doing that, but you felt that safety and trust over time due to that dedicated and consistent and committed approach by the treatment team and the court officers. If I've just spoken for you, if you don't mind, but I think it's important that we
Well,
finish
you
off.
knew what I was going to say.
Yeah, and just so you could finish off, so it's a balanced presentation about a negative here, because rather than saying negative, just what could DTC be doing better in terms of, you know, against the background of this trauma-informed approach that you've mentioned?
Right. So the one experience that like really set me back was when I was making some at least internal progress. I was arrested and I did go up for bail in front of the DTC in a couple of days, but I was not immediately bailed out. So I stayed in there a little longer and then was eventually bailed out. But that experience, I don't know, I mean, I have some idea why, but it was really incredibly traumatic. I was extremely sick in there, and just, I had been to jail before. I had been to prison for a year, and that wasn't nearly as traumatic as that brief time. And it really set me back so much. So I think, of course, clients in DTC are going to get arrested. It's just a process until you become you get out of that lifestyle. But I think doing everything possible to mitigate the trauma and the length of time, and truly being compassionate and supportive and trying to mitigate any trauma that may arise from the other side of the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Bolton, I don't want to abuse the time frame that we have. Is there, are you moving on to another unit now, or would I just have a few minutes to merely suggest to our listeners what success is or isn't, or what it might mean in the drug treatment court?
Absolutely, Your Honor, absolutely. We're going to go to lunch break when you're done.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll merely say the following, if you'll permit me. Really, the two main pillars are to focus on promoting connection with the program, which is perhaps stating the obvious by the participant, and thus really improving the stability and quality of life of our participants. There are 4 indicators that we look for: changes in drug use, obviously, changes in criminal involvement, improvements in quality of life, and of course, the underpinning of drug treatment court engagement. None of these are absolute based, they're progress based. The changes in drug use, decrease in frequency, quantity, potency, severity. Changes in criminal involvement means decrease in frequency and severity of charges, decrease in number of arrests and time in custody. Improvements in quality of life is the essence of what we strive for. The client is housed, has primary care provider or family doctor, has mental health assessment and support, access to psychiatrists and or medication where warranted, reestablishing relationships with family and friends, new and reestablished healthy leisure activities, identification documents being obtained, and education and training being planned, volunteer work, and hopefully to those who are so inclined, jobs. And hope, of course, envelops all of this. The engagement, we know as the clinical team and the court team with our respective years of experience, is that none of this happens without positive relationships and safety, the feeling of safety within the program. The client experiences that connection, therefore, with the treatment and support team, and it demonstrates a shift from the external motivators, which is the finger wagging that many of our participants have been on the receiving end, is if you don't stand up and do the right thing, you're going to jail, the big external motivator. We try to shape that and of course turn it into the internal motivators, which are the most important one, which is wanting to get help, wanting to get clean, and wanting to move on and strive to reach that quality of life. So none of these, the aim is to be mindful of each participant's ability at the time in the moment for them to be able to change. Put another way, what we should be doing is trying to accept one's behavior at his or her best effort at that time. And by taking this holistic approach, it's important to be aware that our participants are not bad people trying to be good. They are unwell people trying to become well. And a trauma-informed approach requires us to ask at the appropriate time, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And the best practices, as I've already alluded to, I'll merely restate them, should include consistency, continuity, ability to motivate, and building trust. And of course, we all know, whether we're raising children, family members, or in courts, garnering trust cannot be forced or fabricated. And so the tools that drive the jurist's influence and that of the whole treatment team and court team is an effort to maintain a sense of legitimacy with the participant, including being the voice of the team, demonstrating neutrality, showing respect, protecting rights of the individual, all of which equates to a generalized concept of fairness. Treating individuals with dignity and civility promotes a felt connection, which in turn affects compliance and acceptance of the team's decisions. Hopefully, the clients or participants over time will get to see the judge in action, so to speak, as a kind, welcoming individual who is being fair to all. And part of the program is that each individual must stand before the court and give his or her update or testimonial so that they can have the opportunity to see how the judge is dealing with everyone, not just the teacher's pets, so to speak, which I have to confess is what Nikoleta became to me, but in that fairness to all. And most importantly, every interaction with a participant for us is an opportunity for engagement. And rather than moralizing about one's character flaws, the judges were to, and hopefully we do, assume the role of confessor, cheerleader, and coach. And more simply put, people value fair procedures because they're perceived to produce fair outcomes. thereby making individuals feel validated and worthy, and that you know them because you follow along with their story and their journey hand in hand. And an individual will live up or down to how he or she is being addressed and treated by the court. So as Nikoleta knows, for all of her experiences, it's a long road, and we, the treatment team and others in your life, can walk it with you, but only you can walk it alone, ultimately. So with all of that, ladies and gentlemen, much more that could have been said, as I'm sure with all of our presentations today, but thank you for your time, and we'll invite questions if there is any further time permitting, Mr. Bolton. But thank you again for giving us this forum. I think this is the soft skill part of the thing. And Nikoleta is just a remarkable young lady. And if I could tell you more about the before and after, or if Nikoleta could, it is quite the story. So please understand that this is not representative of many of our individuals, and we don't set out to produce the Nikoletas of the world. And that's what I meant about meeting people where they are at the time, given their abilities. So I'll stop there, because otherwise I am prone to going on and on. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Justice Clark and Nikoleta, we just do have some comments in the chat thanking you guys for the presentation. And Nikoleta, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. As the survivor of intimate partner violence, it's good to see that we not only survive, but we can thrive and be inspirational and motivational. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's for you, Nikoleta.
And for you, your wonderful speeches, as always.
Yeah, you were both very impressive. I would love to hear more and more from both of you. Maybe another time, maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Nikoleta, I've seen you on a couple of the events, and it's a great pleasure to be getting to know you through listening to you more and more. Can I say that it's wonderful to see a person doing peer support, one of us that makes it and gets out there and is getting to change things, because you are the kind of person that the world will listen to. And I know that because I'm going through something similar. It's wonderful working with the top tier professionals that I've had so much faith in for a lot of years. I've got 40 years of super counselors under my belt since I got off the streets. They're pretty well everything to me. I didn't have a family. I didn't have all these things, but I did find community through professional help. I'm 6 years clean almost right now, but I still have 2 CMHA workers because addiction services joined CMHA, and I still have my addiction service work. Because they just know that I'm involved so deeply on the streets, and it's such a miracle that I've made it, that they don't make me let go yet, and I didn't have to let go. The severity of our situation, I'm still healing after 5 years. So if we're that badly damaged that we're still healing after 5 years, imagine the help that we needed at the beginning, and for us to try and figure things out is so hard for us. I know through the work of the people I work with out there that they do all want help. It's a myth that they don't, but at the same time, it doesn't look like we want help from the way we act when the help's offered, and everything's upside down, but upside down goes both ways. And but together we can bring things right side back up through the loving relationships of the professionals, and us being able to reach out to you guys and trust you, and you guys be there. It's amazing. I just think that peer support is key. Let us be part of your guys' wonderful team, and together we can do it. You guys are wonderful examples. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. And again, Nikoleta would be the first and perhaps the last to say that, as we had mentioned, the primary therapist or therapists here are are just the magic wand. And Nicolette had the benefit of two wonderful therapists, as all of our participants in the Toronto program do. I'll finally say that for anyone who's interested in seeing how this court works in particular, not saying by any means it's the gold standard, but it's been around the longest. And we had the benefit of not only Justice Bentley, who started the program, but Justice Mary Hogan, who became that gold standard. And then along came me. I feel like a place setting in between Justice Hogan and now Justice Heather Pringle, who is on her way to her own gold standard. And if you could see these jurists in action, and there are others on the team, you know, they're the quarterbacks and they're the ones who become the voice of that treatment team and the court team. So every cog in the wheel is at work on every occasion. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nicoleta. Thank you, Your Honor. We're going to go to lunch break, everybody, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicoleta. We'll talk soon.